Hi, everyone, and good evening. My name is Tina Weaver, Executive Director of the ALF Foundation, and I am so excited to share some time with each and every one of you today for the discussion of the State of LGBTQ Fitness, Health, and Wellness call. Our mission at ALF is to remove the barriers that block LGBTQ individuals from access and participation in fitness, health, and wellness, ensuring their success. Today represents an incredibly important day for our community, the anniversary of the Stonewall riots and an uprising. We at the ALF Foundation understand that our work today exists because of the efforts of so many on June 28th, 1969. We would be remiss if we did not say thank you and that we continue to endure. And because of that, we are able to stand on those shoulders and in knowing that we cannot back down for our next generation. And today we're thriving. There's so much to be proud of, and soon you will hear from some extraordinary athletes and their journeys and how our community representation in athletic spaces is vibrant. However, we have to understand that 2023 has been a historic year of anti-LGBTQ bills. They've been introduced to Congress, and we're seeing more and more human rights being stripped and denied to our community. We at the ALF Foundation are here to say that there isn't a singular box that we fit in. Conformity is a thing of the past, and we are far stronger than these attempts of individuals trying to take away our human rights. Right now, we can understand across all populations is that safe spaces are welcoming and inclusive. That is what gives us community. The ALF Foundation works to identify these spaces in which to engage our community for out athletes, queer athletes. Our Out Athletes program is one of our core programs, and it provides support, community, and means to ensure that health and wellness is prioritized for young queer athletes. In 2022, we served 22 athletes. This year, we're serving 29.
I'm Anastasia Lowe. I'm the moderator for today. And I just want to kind of introduce all of the panelists here and just kind of give a quick rundown of who everyone is and what they do. So I'll be starting with RK Russell. RK is a former professional NFL football player, social justice advocate, artist, and author of The Yards Between Us, a memoir of life, love, and football. In August of 2019, Russell made history by becoming the first out active NFL player to identify as bisexual. A decorated defensive end who has played for the Dallas Cowboys and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he has sacked Hall of Famers and gone up against the fiercest competitors at the height of their game. Since coming out, he has written about his experiences as a Black queer man in sports for the New York Times, The Guardian, the Los Angeles Times, Out Magazine, and Queer Majority, among others. So welcome, RK. Glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
Next
Thanks
up
for having me.
is Justice Horn. Justice serves as chair of the City of Kansas City's LGBTQ Commission and plays rugby for the Kansas City Blues Rugby Club. Before that, Horn wrestled at the collegiate level in the NCAA at Northern State University. Most notably, Horn received 2 championship rings from the state of Missouri when Blue Springs High School won the 6A football championship game in 2012 and 2013. He has competed openly as a member of the LGBTQ plus community throughout his life. So welcome, Justice. Glad to have you with us. Next up is Chris Mosier. Chris is a trailblazing athlete and activist and was the first known transgender man to make a men's U.S. national team. He is a 7-time member of the Team USA, 3 times national champion and All-American duathlete, and was the first trans person to compete in the Olympic trials in their true gender. He has been called the man who changed the Olympics and uses his platform as the first trans athlete sponsored by Nike to provide visibility, support, and hope to people of all identities. Chris's website, transathlete.com, is known as the go-to site for information on trans inclusion policy and sport. When not fighting the good fight, Chris mentors transgender and non-binary athletes around the world in hopes that he can live by his motto of be what you needed when you were younger. I absolutely love that motto. Welcome, Chris. I love it. Next up, we have Taylar Stallings. Taylar has been a lifelong athlete across numerous sports at an elite level. She was an elite powerlifter for years, holding 10 powerlifting all-time world records, spanning across 4 weight classes. Stallings then went on to become a 2-time CrossFit regional qualifier and was named the MVP in 2014 for the National Pro Grid League and Best Barbell Specialist in 2014 and 2015, First Team All Grid in 2014 and 2015, and Second Team All Grid in 2016. Stallings was also the 2017 weightlifting national champion for the 75 kilo weight class and was named to Team USA for the Pan Ams and World Teams. Welcome, Taylar. Next up, we have Rob Kearney. Rob is an American professional strongman, pound for pound, the world's strongest man, as well as the first and openly gay professional strongman. A regular competitor in competitions such as the World's Strongest Man, Arnold Strongman Classic, and the Rogue Invitational, he is one of the strongest men in the world. Known as the world's strongest gay, Rob and his husband Joey look to break the stereotype of how the LGBTQ plus community is perceived, especially in the niche world of strength sports. Their goal is to show the world, regardless of your sexual orientation or gender identity, you can be strong. Glad to have you with us today, Rob. Last, we have Janine Hunter. Janine J9 Hunter serves as the board president of the Out Foundation and head coach GM at JC Fit in Jersey City, New Jersey. As a health, wellness, and fitness professional, she has made it her mission to spread awareness and advocate for the importance of building nurturing and supportive environments where minds and bodies are celebrated for who they are. Glad to have you with us, J9. All right, so I'm just gonna kind of dive into the questions and we'll kind of get started today. So it's Pride Month. For me personally, there's so much joy in this month. And there's also a lot of reflection. There are things that I have now in a life that I'm living now that I never thought that I would have when I was closeted. So I think that's a feeling that a lot of queer kids, especially athletes, may resonate with, that deep sense of uncertainty. So my first question, just to the group, whoever wants to raise their hand and talk about it, is, as a young athlete, did you think that you would ever be in the position you are in today?
I guess I'll jump in. Honestly, no. I think for me, not only as a gay strongman, but also, being pound for pound the strongest man in the world, I'm the smallest athlete at this level. So like on multiple levels, competing in these competitions to me seemed completely unattainable. But I think the coolest thing that I had for me was after I did come out in 2014, I realized I became a better athlete, and that's really what kind of propelled me to being one of the strongest men in the world. So to think back, 10, 15, 20 years on this moment now that I'm in, I kind of have to pinch myself every day to realize, I get to do this amazing thing that I love so much as a job, and I get to live the life that I know I was always meant to live.
I love that. I love that so much. Anybody else?
I was kind of anticipating that no, I definitely didn't think I'd be in the position that I'm in today. Growing up, Bible-based, my family was Tennessee and Georgia areas, and my grandfather was a pastor. And of course, when I came out at 16, I thought I was going to not to anything because of my sexuality. And so I just knew that sports saved my life. So all I knew is that I like to compete. I love to compete. In that place, I couldn't be better. And so I poured myself into sports because I never would see many people that look like me. And if I saw one person, I grasped hold onto it. And I just dove deeper into it. And I was just an athlete first. But then when I started receiving messages throughout my career from other athletes saying that I got into this sport because I saw you, or I got into powerlifting because I saw you at first. this is bigger than me. I'm like, oh, hold on. I didn't want this. I just wanted to pick up heavy things and just do crazy things. But then I realized, like, this isn't about me anymore. It's about being that representation I didn't have growing up. And but now seeing across all the different sports, now there's more and more people that look like me, that's able to be who they are. And then coming from my family that wasn't supportive, but now they are extremely supportive in my life. I didn't have to change. I just had to keep on amplifying my thing. So I definitely didn't think I'll be here with all these amazing people out here. So this is definitely.
I think that's so funny because I started CrossFit in 2015, and I remember watching you at regionals. And at the time, there were very few, even just Black people in CrossFit. And then on top of that, Black queer people. I remember watching that and be like, okay, we're here, we're out here, I can do this. So then for me to be on this call is so exciting too, just to be able to share this space with everyone. Chris, I know that you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'll pull the line all the way through here. I think a lot of us couldn't imagine a future for ourselves when we were younger because we didn't see someone like us, which is why it is so incredible, that we have so many trailblazers on this call, because somebody has to be the first in order for everybody else to be able to see that representation. And that's, the part of my motto of be who you needed when you were younger. Just like Taylar just said, being that person that you wish that you had when you were younger. I never imagined I would be on Team USA, be a successful men's athlete, because I didn't see any future for myself, quite honestly. Like when I was a kid, I poured myself into sports in a similar way because that was the space where I had validation and acceptance and a sense of belonging because I was a good athlete. And once I got that feedback, which to me seemed like the same feedback that the rest of my peers got outside of the court of the field, like in the classroom, in the neighborhood, the sports was the only place that I really felt like I could be myself and that other people would be in community with me. So sports saved my life as a kid too, but I didn't imagine that I could have a professional career because I didn't see anybody like me. When I was a young person and all the way up through college, even, I didn't see any transgender men in sports. And I definitely didn't see trans men competing with men, which is what I wanted to do. So the pinch yourself every day definitely resonated with me. But I think that the reason that we are here is because we know the value of creating that space and of showing people not only that we can overcome barriers, but all of us on this call have helped move them out of the way so that nobody else has to, take that same path that we did. So I'm thrilled to be here on this call with everybody and share so many of the same sentiments.
That's awesome. That was a very beautiful way of really summarizing that question. Love it. So my first kind of direct question is going to be for J9. So the Out Foundation has impacted so many lives, mine being one of them. Could you please tell us about yourself and then why you have stepped into the role of board president for the Out Foundation?
Yes, of course. So yes, I'm Janine, also known as J9, letter J, number 9. I actually, just a little background of myself. I am a former All-American middle distance runner, and I competed at a national level in high school and then in college at the University of Texas and University of Arkansas. And then due to an Achilles tendonitis injury, I hung up the spikes and was introduced to CrossFit. And just like our coming out story, I kissed a girl and I liked it. A little bit of hesitation here and there, but then I realized this is where I want to be. So I haven't left CrossFit since. So it's a cool story because the gym that I first walked into is the gym that I work at now. So moving from being a member to being an intern to being a coach to being a now head coach and general manager, my day-to-day is thinking about the first day that I had when I walked into the gym. That first day that I walked in, I felt safe and welcome, right? I walked in, the head coach at the time was a lesbian. There was a Black man working out. There was people of all shapes and sizes, colors of the rainbow. It was amazing. And I'm in Jersey City, so it is a reflection of the diverse the diverse population that is in Jersey City. So there was that. But just having that feeling, everyone being so nice. I know it's Jersey. You hear a lot about Jersey where people aren't nice there, but they are, especially in the community that I'm in. So just having that and knowing that, like me, as well as the owner, Russell Francis, and then our entire staff, you know, we put this into our mission and our vision statement as far as, you know, providing a safe and inclusive and welcoming environment for our members and their families. So being a part of the OUT Foundation is a direct alignment with what I do on a day-to-day. So where I'm able to impact people's lives on a daily basis within the gym, being board president has provided me with a bigger platform to make a larger impact. So when I originally started as a board member, then I'm board president because I got voted in. Yay. And then being a, not just, you know, board president, but being a Black woman as board president, it speaks even more volume, right? It is influential. So where there is, you know, there is a little Black girl somewhere looking up to me, right? Seeing that, it shows that things are possible, right? And so just being in this position and just knowing my role and knowing the impact that I can have, you know, it's something that just kind of drives me every single day. And I sit on this seat proudly every single day, knowing that I'm building relationships, I'm helping people, and I'm helping my people, because I represent multiple communities, right? I represent the LGBTQ plus community as well as the BIPOC community. So, you know, I'm proud to be here, and I'm proud to be here with all of you. And I guess that's a little bit about me.
I love especially what you just said about the visibility, about walking into the gym and seeing, like, just seeing it instantly. I think when you're not a part of, you know, the LGBTQ community or the BIPOC community, you don't understand how powerful seeing yourself in a space is, and how important that is, and how much that can take kind of that weight off your shoulders of, oh, okay, I'm welcome here. I love that. So kind of going to Rob now. Notoriously, you are the world's strongest gay. What has that meant to you, to the queer community, and to those in the strongman community?
You know, for me, it's kind of one of those unbelievable moments where, you know, I've been doing this sport for so long, and after coming out, it was never a moment for me to kind of have that title. It really was just so I could be me, and that's what I really cared about. And being able to, you know, consider myself and be pretty confident that I am the strongest gay man in the world is it's one of those things that over the course of my career, I realized I've been given this platform, and it really opens itself to a lot of different things. Because not only is it, you know, being open to the LGBTQ plus community, but it's also showing the strongman world that we as LGBTQ plus people just want to compete and do the things we love and get the opportunities that everybody else does without having to fear that our sexual orientation or gender identity is going to hinder us or make us look any different than anybody else that's already competing. So when I was able to, you know, kind of make this proclamation after getting better in the sport and really feeling confident in myself, what I've noticed is not only does it give me this really great badge of honor to wear every time I step out on the competition floor, but it also has just opened up the eyes to everyone really in the strength community that, you know, just because we're gay, lesbian, trans, bi, whatever, however you may fall within our beautiful family, it's none of that really holds any merit in this sport of strength sports unless you can compete. And that's what I really learned really quickly when I came out, is people that I look up to for so long and seen in the sport doing amazing things. When I came to one of my first competitions, their biggest concerns were, was I strong enough to compete with everybody? And all the strongman wives wanted to meet my husband. So it was really just this beautiful moment where the sexuality didn't matter. It really was, all right, you're here. Let's see if you can hang.
That's awesome. My next question, I feel like, is so timely with what's going on socially and politically in the US right now. I feel like in the news, we only ever get one side of the story, and rarely is it that of the trans athlete themselves. So Chris, can you provide us with a better understanding of what the exclusion of transgendered individuals in sport has meant? And on top of that, why do you feel there's a direct attack on our transgender community and participation in sports?
Yeah, I'm so happy that you brought this into the space, because what we've seen in the attacks on the LGBTQ community is that trans people, and specifically trans young people in this country, have a huge target on their back. And just to start off with a little bit of context, this year, and it depends on what site you go to for tracking, but I'm going to give some conservative numbers here. We've seen over 550 anti-LGBTQ bills introduced in our country this year, and over 80 of them have targeted transgender kids in sports. And that's a huge number, considering we only have 50 states, and 22 states already ban trans kids like me from playing sports with their friends in school settings. It's quite frankly heartbreaking to see that. And, thinking about all of the amazing things that I personally got as a little gender nonconforming kid, through playing sports, and how everybody on this call, I'm sure, would say that what youth sports gave us was so incredible. So the reason that we're seeing these attacks on specifically transgender young people is not because there's any sort of influx in transgender people participating in sports. And it's not because trans people are dominating in sports, as the media would like you to believe. And to your point, only about 10% of articles that come out about trans athletes actually talk to a trans athlete or to organizations that support us. So a lot of what you are reading is opinion, and it's propaganda for people who don't want to see trans athletes participating in sports. But this has been message tested, and you have to look at the timeline here. The attacks on transgender athletes came after marriage equality was passed. And there were organizations that had all of this money that were trying to fight our opportunity to love who we love and be married in this country, who now had a lot of coin to put into another project. And what they did was message test to see that transgender athletes is a very, very divisive topic for people in sports, for people who have no affiliation with sports. Everybody has an idea about fairness, about competition, and specifically about sports. So the attacks on the trans community in sports is not actually about sports. And the attacks on our access to healthcare is not actually about healthcare. All of this is a coordinated effort to try to get the trans and non-binary community to not be able to live safe, happy, and open lives in this country. And we know that the attacks on young people, specifically kids playing sports with their friends, is an attack actually not just on trans kids, but on all kids, and specifically all young girls and women, because of the policing of people's bodies. And I just want to call into the space that, these bills, these attacks on the trans community, this hot button topic that we're seeing right now, disproportionately impacts Black, Brown, and Indigenous girls, as well as women from the global South, kind of pulling back into that idea of femininity, of like the standard of who's accepted that Tice brought into the space early on. So, these attacks, this is something that all of us should be concerned about, whether you identify as trans or non-binary or not, because this is an attack on all people in sports and all of our community within LGBTQ people, because they will not stop at trans folks. All of us are at risk.
Thank you for sharing that, Chris. I think so many golden nuggets in there, especially what you were saying about it's not even really about, to a certain level, it's about sports, but then there's also this other level where it's not really about sports. It's about controlling people's lives in ways that shouldn't even be controlled. But we could talk about this all day, I'll tell you that. But kind of coming off of the heels of that, Taylar, this is sort of a loaded question, but I love it because I think there are so many facets to this that people don't always think about or understand. What are the biggest barriers to accessing fitness spaces and wellness resources for LGBTQ plus folks?
You're absolutely right. It's definitely a very, very loaded question, and you can go in whatever angle that you want to. But I think some of the biggest barriers are 100% financially. That's going to be huge. Just first and foremost, like just like what I was saying at the beginning, I was told at a very young age that I would never amount to anything because of my sexuality. So I know that many people, they grow up in our community, they may or may not have the support of their family or others, or have access to a lot of things. So meaning that they're 100% dependent on themselves to support and finance things. And a lot of the sports and opportunities out there in fitness arenas, they cost a lot of money, especially if you want to do it safely, you want to do it right, if you want to do CrossFit or whatever. If you want to be somewhere where you feel safe and supported, especially not just go into a global gym, especially if you don't know what you're doing, you're gonna have to pay a little bit of money. But I was very blessed and fortunate to have the abilities that I did, but also knew that I needed to overperform in everything that I need to do in order to pay my own way. Because I knew that on my own, I wouldn't be able to afford access to these gyms and all the sports that I was able to do. So I made sure that I just over access myself and like reading, speaking to other people, making myself knowledgeable and indispensable so I could allow myself to gain coaching positions in the CrossFit area and strength and conditioning and everything else. And then on top of that, with my sports and performances, I knew I had to overperform there in order to gain scholarships and sponsorships and everything else to get into these other venues where I could be supported and I made a living and career for it. But I know that a lot of people don't have that access to an opportunity to do that. So being able to financially be able to support it, that's what drove me to the OUT Foundation itself, was when I heard about the OUT Athlete Program. And I was like, this is what I wish I had access to when I was younger. But so now coming around full circle, being able to be a part of this amazing organization that's able to help out with the financial side. So I didn't know about sports psychology or sports and just mental health. And mental health is huge. I knew that there was a lot of things going on. I'm a psychology major now, so now I'm able to analyze myself, but being able to have access to mental health professionals and to really dive in a little bit deeper and figure out things of why do I feel X, Y, and Z, or be able to have the access that a lot of people in our community don't understand because they don't have that support. That's what made me fall in love with this organization, because they're providing those opportunities to these young individuals so they wouldn't have to figure it out on their own, that they can be surrounded by a community that I didn't have growing up, that a lot of us that's been in this sport that are pioneers in our own rights didn't have that opportunity and community to be around. So being able to have that community and feel loved on and know that we're okay. There's nothing wrong with ourselves is huge, but also having the accessibility and the opportunity to feel safe without judgment and discrimination inside these different realms, whether it's a powerlifting gym, a strong person gym, or CrossFit gym, or wherever, boxing, wherever it is. Like when I went to different competitions, I immediately felt eyes on me because I'm a masculine presenting Black female. So I automatically get eyes on me. I automatically have people looking at me, assuming that I'm on steroids or whatever it is. So I get judged. And so, but when I come into a space like JC Fit, where Janine works, and I worked in many gyms. I walked there, I was like, I feel like I'm at home. But you just feel that when you just walk into that space. And a lot of athletes in our community, they don't have that accessibility to feel safe without that judgment and discrimination. So I think financially and accessibility and the opportunity to feel like safe is the biggest thing. It's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah, it is. But I think you really hit the nail on the head there, especially with that financial aspect. I know when I first started CrossFit, I could only afford a 2-day-a-week plan. And so I would only go 2 days a week. And at one point they said, hey, do you want to get your L1? And for me, it was $1,000. And I said, the only way I'm getting my L1 is if you promise you'll hire me. And they said they would hire me. So I used like the last bit of money I had to get my L1. I started working there, and that completely opened up my world as far as accessibility goes, because not only was I no longer paying for a membership, but also I had just constant access to the gym. So I could train for 3 or 4 hours instead of just that 1 hour class twice a week. So it completely opened my world, which direct track to me being an elite CrossFit athlete today and working with PUMA and all these other things all goes down to something as sort of simple in a sense as accessibility to your gym. Like that's it. And it sounds so simple, but it's so potent,
big.
so important. It's so big. So yeah, great notes there. RK, my next question is for you. As a bisexual man in the NFL, it's what most people would say, I think, is a pretty hyper masculine environment. It must have taken a lot of strength to come out. And so being the first NFL player to come out, or active NFL player to come out, how did you know it was the right time to come out and share your authentic self?
That's a great question. I don't know, the right time seems like a bit of a fairy tale. Like there was no necessarily right time. I think that's what kind of held me up for so long, is I was waiting for something where all the stars would align, or where I would have this big contract and the safety, and I'd be like, okay, maybe I don't care so much about risking my career, or I would, have such a great personal life that I was like, oh, I need to share this with everyone. And, my story unfortunately comes kind of off the back of like some tragedy. I lost my best friend who I came out to in college, Joseph Gilliam. He was my teammate, just like a brother to me in every sense of the word. And in 2017, we found out that he had stage 4 cancer, and I ended up losing him in 2018. And I think when you're in a world that perceives you in so many ways as, a Black man, as an athlete, soon to be, known as a bisexual man, it's kind of easy to feed into these narratives, to at least like focus on them, focus on how people view me, focus on how people treat me in these spaces, the spaces that I feel comfortable in, I don't feel comfortable in. And you start to kind of look at yourself through these labels and these identities, which for a lot of people bring community. So there are positives to, of course, having shared identities. But when I lost my best friend, I experienced grief, which put me in the space of the universal identity, right, of just being human. And I, regardless of my sexuality, my identity, my color, the sport that I love, I was a person who was experiencing grief and loss. And I wasn't equipped at that time to handle those things. I was equipped at that time to play football and to, be this person that was like an efficient, strong, masculine presenting Black man. And none of that had really catered to the emotional part of it, to the healing. So it was kind of within that loss, and also within being injured and having to step away from football for a little bit to rehab, that I started to have to focus on RK Russell, the human being. That's when I got into therapy. That's when I started, really taking inventory of how I was feeling, and in the places that I was going, and how these different environments and communities were making me feel. And it's interesting because I went into therapy to kind of like heal grief. And the first thing I learned was that I couldn't heal it, that it was something that was going to be kind of a companion with me through this life, that I'd have to find ways to remedy it, ways to dip within it and leave it at times, ways to, celebrate the memory that it reminded me of and the person it reminded me of. But it was also where I found my own identity and my own value of self. It set me on the journey of not just knowing myself, but accepting myself and loving myself, and realizing like, hey, every day on this world is not promised. You are either going to waste it living these half truths or holding something in, or you're going to live it to the fullest. Embrace yourself first and foremost, because you go to sleep with yourself every night, wake up with yourself every day. Regardless, you're going to go through this world being you. You need to be comfortable with what that means and who you are, and moving forward. And there was no right time. It was just now. And I think that's the biggest thing that I learned through that whole experience. And after coming out, I don't know why it took me so long. Like, I know, but I don't really like it. The emotional connection to it was severed. And I want that for other people. I want them to understand that the fear of coming out, for a lot of us, of course, is real. There's safety issues and concerns. There's laws, being made against us in legislation and people, but that there is a freedom and a power and a strength in it that is second to none. That has transformed my life in ways that football, regardless of how much I loved and how great it was, that football never did for me and never could do for me. And I'm, just want people to understand that the right time is what you make it.
That's so beautiful. I'm so sorry for your loss, but first of all, but I love that the journey that you were able to take and work through. And I think that's just so true. There is never this perfect moment. And I was the same way. I waited until I was 23, 24 to come out, waiting for the perfect moment. It just never came. But I can say, like, in the same sentiment, is life after coming out so much better and so much is improved. I'm like, man, why didn't I do it sooner? But it's just that's everyone's kind of individual journey. But I don't think there ever is necessarily this like shining perfect moment. It just is. You just got to do it. It's just whatever the moment appears when that journey kind of comes to that peak. Justice, my next question's for you. We're all under this kind of one LGBTQ plus umbrella, but we're all unique and different individuals. Could you talk about the differences between sexual identity and gender identity and sex in the fitness space?
Yeah, so I think I got the hardest question, how to define our community. So, at a basis, gender identity and sexual orientation have been the basis of our community. But what we've seen over time is that those two things are interwoven. You can be a trans woman and still identify as straight, or be someone who's non-binary that is in a gay relationship. So it just depends on the person. One thing I have the privilege of doing is serving as chair of the LGBTQ commission. So if you're under that umbrella, if you call yourself part of our community, if you're queer, then we're going to fight for you. So it's actively changed. One thing about just humankind is we're always expanding our thinking, expanding how we identify. And it's tough to put a clear definition on that because it changes for everyone. And a lot of people change throughout time. So at a basis, I don't know if I answered your question, but it's always changing. I think one thing that's been fairly easy for me is, as our community continues to change, is just always making sure our community, our spaces are accessible to whoever may come into them. One thing you learn in community organizing is to meet people where they're at. Let's say, for example, when we had our big Trans Day visibility celebration, we had the Admiral come into Kansas City. There was this big program. And that evening, we decided to feed people. We knew that some people would be struggling, so that was an opportunity. But in that same sense, we also decided to light the city in the color of the trans flag, because we also realized that people may not be in their journey to show up at a Trans Day, a visibility event in full force. So I think it's tough trying to define and kind of get your arms around the community, when I think better focus is ensuring wherever the community is, wherever they show up, that you meet them where they're at and you're making things accessible. So I think if that's in the fitness world, in gyms, in community centers, and just even how you move, it's important that we're bringing folks along and meeting them where they're at. One interesting thing that happened today is, here in Kansas City, we have folks who are organizing around better making our spaces accessible for people in our community who are disabled. Me as someone who is able, I compete, I never would have thought about that. So when you think of how they show up in bars or restaurants, how it's inaccessible to even go to Pride or even be in the parade, I think it's on us to continue to make those spaces accessible as the community continues to change, as we have more and more young people grow up into thriving people. I think the best thing we can do is continue to make our spaces accessible for whatever our community looks like.
I love that. I love the continued, I like, it's kind of like a growth mindset. We're continuing, we're not just content with where we are. We want to continue pulling people and helping people and bringing people up. I love it. Rob, my next question is for you. You're also, I think, kind of similar to RK, at least, but based on my assumption, you're in a pretty hyper masculine space at times. I was actually recently prepping for a CrossFit competition and it had some strongman elements in it. I was going through your Instagram for tips. And then I totally just ended up stalking you a little bit. And like, there was a picture of you and your husband. And that skeptic in me was just so prepared for comments just to be negative. And I remember looking at them and there were so many positive comments. And I love like seeing that much positivity on a social media page, much less with kind of the sport that you're in, or just sports, I think in general, especially for men, tend to kind of lean towards some of that hypermasculinity. Could you tell us more about like an affirming experience that you've had in the fitness space?
Yeah, for me, it's going through competing. Obviously, you mentioned it's a hypermasculine sport, right? It's a bunch of really strong men in my competitions getting around the biggest weight possible to see who can lift it, right? Like, and we get to do this amazing thing, but it's also a performance at the end of the day. And so I kind of look at this twofold, right? So the first is kind of alluding to what you were saying in terms of like the social media presence. As somebody who lives every single day as unapologetic as possible in a sport that rewards masculinity and strength. For me, it's one of those things that I've learned that, social media is both beautiful and empowering and also full of hate. And when I go through life and I made it a point to, show my strength, not just in the gym, but also in my relationship, one thing that it does to me is I realize that like on my platform, it's more than just about what I can lift. So the coolest things for me and like the first like affirmation I had of really what I was doing was right was one of the first times I remember receiving a message from a 16-year-old boy who was going through questioning who he was and was knowingly living in a household that would not be accepting of him. And I read his message and he said, up until a few days ago, I had really been contemplating the thought of suicide. But it wasn't until I saw your page that made me realize that I can still play sports and still do the things I love without having to be who I'm not. And getting a message like that for the first time, it's one of those things where you realize, you kind of have that moment of, I never thought I was going to be that person for somebody. I think all of us on this call have always looked up to some kind of sports figure, but as many people have mentioned, we never really see anybody like ourselves. So for me to now realize that I'm going to be this person for so many people all over the world, it was kind of just like this holy shit moment of, what I'm doing is bigger than just the weight I can deadlift. And, just in terms of like the affirmation of like, okay, what I'm doing is the right thing, regardless of how many people hate me for it. That was, really an affirmation of what I was doing was right. On the second side of things is when I compete, this level of the sport, there is about 40 men competing at the highest level of the sport in strongman. And it's one of those that's obviously extremely competitive. And it's one of those where at the end of the day, there's a limited amount of competitions and only one person gets to win. And what I've realized is while I have been unbelievably successful in this sport and achieved things I never thought imaginable, what I realize is what I want people to remember is the character I bring to the sport. While I may not be the one holding the trophy at the end of every competition, I bet your ass you're going to have the most fun watching me compete on that floor. Whether it's the wild spandex I bring to every competition, or if it's in the fact that when we get entrance music for competitions, all the competitors do the very masculine man thing and play heavy metal music and, are headbanging and doing that stuff. And what do? I flip the script and come out to It's Raining Men and make the entire crowd dance with me. I want to leave an impression on these people to show them that what I'm doing is pure joy. And then I also get to celebrate with my husband on the competition floor afterwards. And when I can really make sure that that is my message and I feel the love and the response from the crowd every time I go out and compete, that's the affirmation that, what I'm doing is right, but the legacy and the imprint I'm living on this sport is even more important.
That's amazing. I was at Rogue Invitational the year or a couple years, whatever year you were there. And I distinctly remember your title. I was like, who is this guy? Like me and my fiance were sitting there. We were like looking you up on Instagram. So I was like, this guy is so fun to watch.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
J9, my next question is for you. So much change is driven by the leaders in fitness and health communities. I think that should not be underestimated, but very often it is. I think leaders of these spaces go a long way in setting a precedent for acceptance and inclusion. Do you have any advice for coaches, teachers, mentors, or other individuals working with LGBTQ plus individuals within the health and wellness spaces?
I sure do. The biggest thing, I'll just go over about 3 of them. A big one would be to be mindful, right? And to listen. Listen and know your audience, whether that's in a one-on-one setting, right? Or a group setting. A lot of us, right, of course, we're coaching groups of people, and we're saying a lot of things on a day-to-day basis in CrossFit gym, right? When we're coaching class. So just be mindful of your words, be mindful of, it's a big thing, right? Pronouns, be mindful of those, knowing who you're speaking to and how you're speaking to them, knowing your clients. I think that's a big thing meant for coaches specifically. Then also, I guess, be humble, because when we bring it back to pronouns, you might mess something up, right? We're human. We are all human, and we are flaws and all. Shout out to Beyonce. But we have those flaws. We're gonna say something wrong, but you have to apologize. It's okay, right? It's all right. Apologize and move forward, but don't just move forward and let that go. We need to always and never stop learning, right? We have to keep educating ourselves and finding the resources to educate. We keep talking about, I think a common theme is that accessibility, right? Providing that type of accessibility, getting those resources, finding that access. And the Out Foundation is a great resource to use to put you in connection and build those relationships and help you find the resources that you need to be able to understand more, so that it can help us on our day-to-day when we are especially working with LGBTQ plus individuals. And then I guess that last one too, and I want to bring this back to Tice earlier, just about just when we want to be, and we're looking for these safe environments, especially, the BIPOC community, especially Black people, owners, your staff has to be a reflection of who you want to walk through that door, right? Your teams have to be that. And I tell you right now, JC Fit, we are just that. Exactly what is on staff is exactly what you're going to see around the room. And it needs to be that. You can't just talk the talk. You have to walk the walk. You have to go out there and find people that are going to be a reflection of what you're trying to provide, or you're saying that you provide. Don't just talk about it, but be about that. So I think that, if we can't find it, we don't have it, we need to, right? We need that access. We need to find those resources. So that's what we need to do. If you're not doing it as a coach, you got to be doing it as an owner. You have to. So just finding ways to provide that accessibility, I think, is huge. So again, be mindful, just be humble, never stop learning, right? And do your due diligence to provide that accessibility, because exactly what you talk, it needs to be a reflection, right? You need to act on that. It needs to be a reflection of your actions. So that's my advice for my people out there.
I love the never stop learning so much. I think as like a trainer, one of my number one things is I should be constantly learning. What I knew 3 years ago should be have grown, to now. That should be a constant progression. And Taylar, like kind of coming off the same theme, as trainers, we should be actively expanding our knowledge and understanding the people we work with in order to best serve them as a whole. How do intersecting social identities, for example, BIPOC, disabled, or neurodivergent people, impact working with LGBTQ plus clients?
I feel as if I got all the loaded questions for this evening. But they're so good. They're so great. And that's what the whole point of this discussion is about, is to talk about these things. And the biggest thing is you have to be empathetic. It all comes back down to just having empathy. And that's what I've always lived my life, or try to live my life at, is that everybody is different. Everybody's come from different walks of life. Even though I am a Black masculine presenting lesbian, the way I grew up is going to be completely different than somebody else who is a Black masculine presenting lesbian. So if somebody walks in the door, we may look like twins, it doesn't mean that we ourselves have the same experiences. So just being empathetic to their own lenses. And that comes with, everybody's going to come and walk in through the door with different challenges and different ways and different adaptations. So it doesn't matter if you're living with a disability, or if you're coming in as a person of color, on top of being part of the LGBTQ plus community. Everybody has layers on top of layers on top of layers. Just when I speak with my clients, whether it's in fitness or in real estate, my biggest opportunity that I see is my consultations. Because in my consultations, I am able to have that discussion with them and figure out their layers and be empathetic to the way I need to present myself towards them. Because again, the way that I coach this athlete is going to be completely different than the way that I coach this athlete. The way I talk to this person over here is going to be completely different than the way I'll talk to this person, no matter what they look like, no matter what kind of challenges that they may face or may present us with. Is our job as the professionals, as being that leader, and figure out ways to create adaptations in order to make them feel inclusive and safe. So it shouldn't be like, oh, this person over here is in a wheelchair. No, that isn't what it's about. and like, okay, we have another athlete that's coming in, and this is the ways that we have that we can do to make them feel accommodated or whatever. So, and it doesn't matter what it is, that there's always ways to make people feel safe, but it's our job to be empathetic to everybody's different social identities, and to create a sense of safety. Because I always tell people that people fear what they don't understand. So I always find it as an opportunity to try to educate more people about more people living with color, more the LGBTQ plus communities. Even if I don't know everything, I'm gonna talk about what I do know, but also explain that there's other people's experiences as well too. That it's just have a conversation. It doesn't hurt. You don't have to agree with everybody, but you can understand some people where they're coming from and everything. But I always just say, just be empathetic to everybody, even though that they're a part of the LGBTQ plus community, but there are different layers that everybody's just still that everybody still comes with, just to be open to hear that and to be able to face those challenges and adaptations accordingly.
I really love that. I love that sense of empathy. I think that's something that is a great thing that's definitely shifting through CrossFit and training spaces now. I remember when I was younger, my mom actually had a personal trainer, and it was literally just like they would go in, they would do the session, she would just sleep. And there was like no conversation. There was like no getting to there was like these different things. I feel like there's kind of been this huge shift in training and for coaches and trainers now, where we're getting that opportunity to get to know people and get knowledge from people, and then we get those opportunities for empathy and learning more. I love that. Justice, we're on our final 3 questions here. Justice, taking another step back and widening kind of the scope of what we've been discussing, could you talk about how local, state, and national policies impact your work with LGBTQ plus clients, and how you navigate and help your clients navigate those policies?
Yeah, so I don't even know where to start with that. One thing that folks should understand if they're on this call is, let's say where you're standing right now, everyone operates in a community that either has a city government, that's your mayor and city council, outside of city government, your county government, that may usually be your county executive, board of commissioners, and then your state government, your state legislatures and governors, and then national politics, which is United States Senate, United States House of Representatives, and the President of the United States. On top of all of those many governments, our biggest issues, as stated before by Chris, have come from our state legislatures, our state houses that have made anti-LGBTQ bills the #1 priority in state houses. What's been really tough for me is how to continue to make Kansas City a welcoming and affirming place. Kansas City is in the deep red state of Missouri, where they, January 2021 made national news they set the record for the amount of anti-LGBT bills. So, it's really been interesting for me because we've been very strategic. One thing you should know about college wrestling is I may not beat you in the first half, but I'll get you in the third. So it's made us very creative here in Missouri. And, out of 32 bills, only 2 stuck. It was a trans sports ban, trans healthcare ban. And what we did here in Kansas City is we declared ourselves a sanctuary city. Basically saying we are not going to force Missouri state law to go after trans people or healthcare providers for providing life-saving care. So we've been very creative, and really, what I tell people here in Kansas City is no one's going to save us but us. We have a lot of phenomenal activists, community members, and people who don't have the privilege of just moving states. I think those people who live here in our states who cannot move deserve to be fought for, especially in a very backward state like Missouri. So it's absolutely made it frustrating, but people have seen that we're going to fight. Our community is not going to be pushed around. We're not going to be bullied. And I think that's why they put me in this position as chairs, because I know how to take a punch and hit right back. Because, why this is really passionate to me is, I play rugby now. I wrestled in college, and, I competed openly throughout high school sports. And at a basis, I'm very passionate in seeing more LGBT people in sports and athletics. So to me, my work is directly reflective of that, because what do we think anti-LGBT bills and bills that lock out trans kids do? We look around and see no professional representation, no representation in college athletics when, unless you're an athlete, where you get your start. It's in middle school, high school. And if we're continuing to choke the pipe down there that allows for more LGBT representation, we're not going to see more representation. So at a basis, why I really fight for against these policies is because, for a lot of us, I think all of us on this call can say, I played football to fit in. I kind of have a higher voice. People knew I was gay before I did. But when I played football, all that stopped because they knew I knew how to hit. So I think at a basis, when we not only bar, kids from playing sports, we bar them from having a life where they get to be thriving adults, thriving athletes. So, I know that was a long explanation, but we've gotten creative. We've fought the good fight, and we're going to continue to do that. But at a basis, why we fight this, especially, the trans sports issue, is because they deserve to compete in sports like any of us do. And, you know, one thing I do want to name is, you know, none of these laws impact me. You know, I'm a cisgender gay man who's put in this seat. And one thing I notice is for trans people, we put a lot of emphasis on them having to be like, they have to hold all that weight. And I think I really want to name why it's important for us as cisgender allies and people in our community is, you know, they're attacking our trans siblings. And, you know, it's been really disheartening to see a lot of gay men and women be absolutely quiet, because it's one of those, you know, it doesn't impact me. When how I view it is, if you come for one of us, you come for all of us. We're a community. So I really want to name that, why it's important for us always to empower and center trans folks in this fight, but they can't be the only people showing up. We need our community to show up. We need to be there in solidarity. Our allies need to show up. And, you know, it's important that we fight this fight, because if they get an inch here, they're going to try some more. Then they're going to keep going. So it's like, we need to be strong and really defending all of our folks and all of our communities. It's why, you know, and I'll finish this up, why no matter the advancements of our community, why, you know, even today, it's the 54th anniversary of the Stonewall riots today. And that was spearheaded by not only drag queens, but, you know, trans folks who led the opposition against police brutality. But then today in 2023, although we have marriage equality, we have, you know, non-discrimination ordinances and so on and so forth, trans people are the #1 targeted people of our community. And we continue, even in Kansas City, to see Black trans women be slain in our streets. So I really want to name that those issues do not have to impact us for us to show up. So I really want to name that. I really want that to be the last thing I say, because they come for one of us, they come for all of us. And our trans siblings can't stand on the line by themselves.
You got me ready to fight, Justice. I think everything you say, just it can't be underestimated. Even just the impact of just at the very base, what you're saying about the impact of youth sports. Everyone on this call is talking about just how much youth sports has carried us to where we are alone. And then further on that, even just, you know, legislation and us all as a community fighting for our trans individuals in our community. It's just, everything you said was just amazing. RK, how do certain aspects of your identity impact other aspects of your identity? So kind of like, you know, obviously there's your racial identity. How does that impact your experience with sexual orientation? I know, you know, being Black, there are definite things that kind of collide, being a person in the LGBTQ community and also being a person in the BIPOC community. And how does gender kind of influence what kind of privilege you have access to?
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's another great question. For me, my identities also like build off of each other. I think there was a conception or misconception that before I came out, or when I was in the process of coming out, the decision seemed confusing. People were like, you know, you already go through so much as a Black man in America. Why would you kind of like add this other thing onto your plate? Which is hilarious. I'm like, I didn't add it. You know, whoever you believe in or the creator, whoever, you know, they sprinkled a little bio on me and here I am. I didn't add it to the plate. It was already there. And honestly, like dealing and navigating racism in America, as awful as it is, how much I fight against on a day-to-day basis, it equipped me to fight against homophobia. It equipped me to be, you know, to love myself and understand that regardless of how other people feel about me, I was made the way that I am for a reason, that I am who I am for a reason, and that person, that I deserve to move through this life with joy and happiness and in pursuing the things I love, regardless of other people's perceptions. The limits that other people have of me in their mind are theirs, they're not mine. I do not share your same limits. I do not share your same thoughts. I don't share the concerns or the fears or the prejudice or the stereotype you have, therefore it doesn't really affect me or stop me from moving through my life. That is all things that I learned being a Black man in America, and all things that I carry into LGBTQ plus spaces as well, because it's something that all people who've been oppressed, all people who are in groups with marginalized voices or with voices that are often either unheard or erased or under attack. I think it's something that we all have a bit of. I think that to fight against homophobia is also to fight against racism, is also to fight against sexism and misogyny, that we're all fighting against the idea that people are different or less than because of the way that they're born. Like, that is the true enemy. And that is something that intersectionality, I think, makes very easy for me to see. The same people that hate me for the color of my skin, next day will hate me for the person I love, next day will hate me for that. It's just like you're pulling at whatever you think you can to really like incite a reaction from yourself or a group that you feel has power over me or my life, or that has resources that you think you can hold for your own and for yourself. So that's kind of how my identity continues to impact and compound and build off of each other. It also, I think, has created bridges to communities where before I didn't really see bridges. I realized that the bridge between communities like the Black community and the LGBTQ plus community are people. There are people like me and others that I've encountered in the space, and that, we all exist within each other, and then we can all be family. And we can all sit at the same table and build tables at places where we need them built, which I think is super important and powerful. I think it's something that I also see in the LGBTQ plus community, being a bisexual man and having not as much representation at times, limited information at times, that though the letters are different of the LGBTQ plus, they all stand together, and that's important. That's something that we need to all remember. And when it comes to privilege as a cisgendered athlete, I was never told that I couldn't play my sport because of my gender identity. And I think that no one should be told that. If I wasn't told that, if my colleagues weren't told that, then other people should not be subject to that as well. I think that the idea to withhold sport, something that is literally built off community, that is the actual foundation, heart of it, is bringing people of different backgrounds, diverse backgrounds together for common community and for love and support. To withhold that from LGBTQ plus people, to withhold that specifically from trans people, is egregious to what sport actually means. To egregious to what sport was actually built for. So I think it's important that in spaces where I am welcomed in, to voice that, though just because I am welcome in a space doesn't mean that the space is a safe space, doesn't mean that the space is intentional. And honestly, more actually, it's probably intentional to be not. It's probably the intention is to be divisive. Then that is a space that sport should not live, because that is not the nature of sport. It's important for me as a cisgender person to constantly speak on that, especially as a male athlete, a cisgendered male athlete, because there's not really many cisgender male athletes right now lending their voice to the trans community and to trans athletes and trans youth. And I think that needs to change. So I'm going to try to be that change.
I love it. That's a great note of lending that voice, just kind of almost directly based off what Justice was saying. That's amazing. I love it. Final question today for Chris. Do you have any advice for what being inclusive looks like, or how to create inclusive spaces for LGBTQ plus people, especially trans and intersex folks? And what do you see as a positive example of trans inclusion in sport?
All right, let's wrap this thing up here. First of all, before I even answer this, I want to say you have done a phenomenal job moderating. Everybody give it up for our moderator. And I think and thank you to the Out Foundation for having all of us. This Justice got me in my feels. I've laughed. I've felt connected. So this panel has done all of the things, and it's been fantastic. I think when we're looking at this picture, and J9 did a great job of answering this, in a different version. So I'm just going to kind of recap of what things that we could look at. But looking at the makeup of this panel, this is sort of the diversity that we should be looking at when we're moving into spaces. We need to see reflections like this when we're going into spaces. So one thing that J9 said right at the top of that last answer was, think about that first day, right? All of us as athletes, as people working in the sports industry, in gyms, or just going to spaces, think about that first day that you stepped in that space. Did you feel like you belonged? Were you a little unsure, right? And what could that group have done to make you feel like that was home, like Taylar said, right? Like that line, I felt like I was home. everybody knows that feeling. I hope that we all have a space that we can go to, or a person we can be with, where we just feel at home. And that's what we need to be replicating in our sports and athletic spaces. So for me, a couple of things that means, one, queer people, every time that we step into a space, whether you know this consciously or not, we are looking for signs that we will be accepted and safe to be exactly who we are. And I've been out for 13 years, and still, when I go into spaces, even though I navigate the world mostly without being harassed about my transness, with kind of cisblending male privilege, even now, even with that privilege that I carry, I'm still looking for signs that it's safe for me to be me. And so, we're looking for the flags, we're looking for the fans, we're looking for the stickers, the buttons, we're looking for all of that. But if we don't see that, and in some spaces that are not specifically queer spaces, you might not see that. If we don't see that, we're listening to the language that's being used to see if it's safe for us to be ourselves. So pronouns, using inclusive language, like talking about partners, not talking about boyfriends, girlfriends, making assumptions about people's sexual orientation or their gender identity, just allowing that space for people to be themselves, right? Because when you're at the bar, not the bar, the bar, right? When you're at the bar, when you're on the court or the field, when you are doing your athletic thing, as was mentioned before, all of that goes to the side. You are a part of a team. You are doing that collective elective suffering together, right? Where we all join together. It's that team dynamic, that team culture. Some of us are, would consider ourselves team athletes. Some of us individual athletes. Some people on this call might not even consider themselves athletes, might be unsure about that title. But I think if you have a body, you are an athlete. If you show up, you are an athlete. So lean into that, right? So thinking about that first day experience, what would make you feel like you belong, thinking about the makeup of the people that we're seeing when we walk into spaces, and then just put yourself in the shoes of somebody else to go, if I was a trans woman, what would my experience be like in this physical space when I walked in the door, when I went to registration, when I tried to sign up for a class, when I went to get changed? What's the experience going to be like for different members of our community going into these spaces? Our work really starts internally, but we can do systemic and organizational change by making policies and procedures for restrooms and signups and things like that. But the real difference that every single person on this call can make is that individual change. It's that treating people with kindness and respect and love and dignity, and knowing that every single person should have the opportunity to experience the life-saving, life-affirming power of moving your body and being a part of sports.
Ending on a really high note. Thank you, Chris, so much for that. Thank you for bringing your fan as well.
So hot in here right now.
I just want to say thank you to everyone who has added today and talked today. Your journeys are so inspiring. I know there are young queer kids that can see themselves in each and every one of you. You all are beacons of hope and change. And I love that for so many of us, we are getting to be the person, or we are the person that our child self needed. So I'm so glad I got to spend this time with all of you. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Tina.
Hi. Wow, what an incredible conversation. Just something that was so powerful. And I think I've grabbed nuggets from every single one of you. In my years of serving as a nonprofit leader, working with our LGBTQ+ community, you all just taught me something. So for those that are on the call, know that it's a journey. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And we have so much more work that we can do together. So thank you to this panel and to the conversation. And Anastasia, chef's kiss. I'm telling you, you are some nice work there. Appreciate you. So as we're going forward, folks, and thanking our panelists, I want to be sure that we also thank a couple of other areas that have been brought to this table. Some of our panelists today have written books, right? And it would be my honor to share with each one of you today on this call that RK, Chris, and Rob have all incredible resources. RK's book, The Yards Between Us. Chris has services for trans inclusion at transathlete.com. and Rob's children's book, Strong, which recently was recognized with the Stonewall Award of Honor. So totally rad. Click on those QR codes to learn more, grow, and support these folks for all that they have done for our community. Next, I also want to take this moment to just, as we continue to grow in our community, is understanding allyship and the partners that have brought us here today. We're so excited to highlight partners with Blink Fitness and Athletic Brewing Company. Their support in which we can grow our services and reach is a testament to their commitment to inclusion. So thank you for not just Blink and Athletic Brewing Company, but Nike, the CDP, PUMA as well, and so many other partners. While we are looking at this, folks, and in closing, I believe that there's one item that we can walk away with. Human strength is greater than our muscle strength. And as we're talking today, I want you to be able to lean into the understanding of empathy and compassion. For all of our young LGBTQ individuals, please know that your community is vibrant, growing, and strong. The OUT Foundation is for community, ensuring that safe, welcoming, and inclusive spaces exist and are growing. And I thank each one of you for joining us today on one of the most important days of history. We're able to stand tall today because of the Stonewall riots. And because of that, we will continue to grow. We will continue to illuminate dark spaces and hopefully be that light for our next generations. So from myself, everyone on this call, and everyone that participated in health and wellness, and we wish you all a very, very happy Pride. Cheers.